Welcome to the Common Man Football Show. My name is James Coburn, and today's episode, I figured we'd start a new sort of series in terms of fantasy football musings. So just general thoughts and opinions about different sort of situations that deal with fantasy football implications. In this video, we're going to talk about the Indianapolis Colts backfield in terms of analytics and data. So we're going to look at all the players that encompass the offensive line of the Colts. We're going to look at the running back situation there, all based on data and analytics to give some sort of perspective on what to expect in the future with this backfield. Now, to give a little backstory on the Indianapolis Colts, this is a team that in many ways is building its offensive line like the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys, at one point, they were kind of up and down with Tony Romo. And they decided, you know what, we're going to build the offensive line. So they drafted Travis Frederick, center in the first round, which surprised a lot of people. Went on to become, one of the best centers one of the best centers in the NFL. They went on to draft Zach Martin. They got, of course, Tyron Smith, who they got a little bit prior to that. But they were making big time investments in the first round, or at least the top, the top 100 picks on offensive linemen. And so far, they've built one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, and all it took was getting a all-star running back like Ezekiel Elliott to take them to the top. They still were very productive regardless of Elliott. I mean, when they had Darren McFadden there, they were able to have him turn in a 90-plus percentile season in terms of his production. But you get the drift. The Cowboys, in many ways, were building their team with high investments in the first to second, third round kind of area, especially the first round. And that's what the Colts are doing. I think they look at the situation right now. They look at Andrew Luck in kind of a Tony Romo kind of slump to a bit. The defense is kind of declining, or has been in the decline in many ways. The offense is not exactly doing what it needs to do. So they want to, create a bit more balance. And add a bit more protection, so on and so forth. And that's what the Colts have done. When you look at the picks they've got this year in particular, Quentin Nelson, I've done a lot of videos in the past in terms of my, where I basically talked about his athleticism. Like, here's his athleticism here in terms of his explosive lower body strength score, speed score, and flexibility score. All terms and definitions are in the description, by the way, so if you're not familiar with any of the work that I do, you can go there to kind of get a general overview of the stuff I'm talking about, at least how I come to the data or the methodology. But Quentin Nelson pretty much hits all the thresholds you're looking for in terms of All-Pro and Pro Bowl potential offensive lineman, in terms of interior offensive lineman, offensive guard specifically. And Quentin Nelson, was the guy they drafted. Was the first pick for them in the first round. When you get to the averages at the position, very, 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 very near the averages of an All-Pro to Pro Bowl guard. And film-wise, he's just a fantastic player. Was by far one of the best players that I saw, that I scouted over the course of the year. And that kind of remained the same throughout the year. So just a fantastic player. And then, of course, you get Braden Smith from Auburn, who some people are confused about, but he tested great as an athlete. 96.68 in terms of explosiveness, 65.90 in terms of speed, and 61.11 in terms of flexibility. Pretty much has Pro Bowl potential overall in terms of his athleticism traits. Very explosive, pretty fast, pretty flexible, at least reasonably flexible when you look at the averages at the position. Similar situation, pretty much within range of starter potential to Pro Bowl potential in some ways. At least with the bottom end threshold. So, they went out and they invested heavy in really athletic offensive linemen. You look at the other sort of offensive linemen they have there. Of course, they drafted Ryan Kelly in 2016. Very athletic offensive center. 81.68 in terms of explosiveness, 95.65 in terms of speed, and 91.08 in terms of flexibility for his size. Has had a bit of the injury bug. It's definitely been something that's kind of slowed his career down a bit. But you can definitely see that if he is healthy, you have a very good road grader here. And then, of course, you have the other offensive lineman that they have, of course, Anthony Costanzo, not great in terms of explosiveness and speed, but definitely great flexibility or balance for his size. Fills the role that he needs to fill as sort of a left tackle. And then, of course, you have Denzel Good, who has a very similar profile to Braden Smith. Explosive, fast, pretty flexible, pretty above average in terms of flexibility. So again, you have this offensive line that's just filled with above average athletes. You have Denzel Good, you have Braden Smith, you have Quentin Nelson, you have Brian Kelly. Anthony Costanzo is not as explosive and fast as the players I just mentioned, but definitely someone who has great balance for his size and can fill a role at least as a pass protector in many ways. So you see what they're doing here. You see what they're doing here. In many ways, the skill sets they're looking for is for a zone blocking scheme. And the reason why I say that is because they're emphasizing explosiveness over pure speed and flexibility. Explosiveness, the explosive lower body strength score is basically measuring the ability to explode out of your stance, to have that great sort of initial punch, if you will. And zone blocking schemes a lot of times is not about running 5 yards and hitting somebody. Oftentimes it's taking 2 steps and boom, into whatever zone you're talking about. Whatever side of the formation you're blocking, whatever zone you're blocking. So there's less emphasis on speed and more emphasis on just that initial quickness and pop, and that initial boom, if you will, that explosiveness. So all the offensive linemen here fit the bill. The only problem, though, is do they have their Ezekiel Elliott? Do they have Zeke? And the one thing I can tell you is this is Ezekiel Elliott. So this is Ezekiel Elliott in terms of his production. He had all-pro potential production coming out. And he also had very good athleticism traits, at least based on the athleticism traits he was able to test. You counter that with what the Colts have right now. And we're going to go through the entire backfield here. You have Marlon Mack, of course, who's at the top of the depth chart still. All reports say that he's still the lead for the committee, but he does have some question marks. Production-wise, 70.89, not bad, 5-time Pro Bowl potential, but when you look at the average starter, an average Pro Bowl player, they're all well above that. They're all 75 or higher in many instances, that's basically the average. So he's definitely within range of Pro Bowl potential, but his biggest issue is just athleticism traits. Good athleticism trait, 77.97 in terms of explosiveness, 75.72 in terms of speed, but does not have a single 79 or higher athleticism trait. Not only that, didn't do the 3-cone or short shuttle, which is a big deal when it comes to projecting running backs, because 95% of all All-Pro / Pro Bowl running backs since 1999 had at least a 7.09 3-cone. And since we don't know Marlon Mack's 3-cone, there is a bit of a mystery to him when it comes to that particular area. But he's definitely an above-average athlete. But he's not a perfect guy. He's definitely not Ezekiel Elliott when it comes to production. And then, of course, you get to the players they just drafted this year. Hines, of course, not the most productive player, but does have a 79 or higher athleticism trait in terms of his speed score, 87.42 out of 100, which I'll get to in a moment. I'll get back to this point in a moment. And then, of course, you have Jordan Wilkins, running back out of Ole Miss. Production, not that great, similar to Hines. And athleticism is worse than Hines in many ways. Explosiveness, just not really where it needs to be. Speed is... oof. And didn't really do all the flexibility testing he needed to do to determine any of that stuff. So he's another guy where there's just lack of athleticism here. And then, of course, you get to some of the other bottom of the depth chart guys. Josh Ferguson production is just not that fantastic. And his athleticism is not that great either, very similar to Jordan Wilkins. And then, of course, you have the older backs. I don't want to say they're that old, but they're definitely up there in age with of course, Robert Turbin, whose production coming out at Utah State was not exactly the best. Definitely, 66.01 is not terrible, but it definitely doesn't hit the 5-time Pro Bowl area, and it's also far off from the average Pro Bowl and starter score, which kind of explains why he may be in the predicament he is, even though he is a fantastic athlete. He was one of the best. He is one of the best athletes at running back in the NFL right now. But production oftentimes supersedes athleticism in many instances. And then, of course, you have the last guy, Christine Michael. Fantastic athlete, but production coming out 23.60 out of 100, nowhere near the Pro Bowl average, starter average, etc., which explains a lot of his career in many ways, even though he is a fantastic overall athlete. So that's, nobody's denying that. That's why he still gets chances. But the reason why he wasn't productive in college in many ways explains why he's not a starter today, and why he's had trouble kind of staying on each team. Bottom line is, again, you have a situation where what do you do in this situation? So you have a great offensive line, at least on paper. You have very, very athletic offensive linemen right now, and especially Ryan Kelly if he stays healthy. But you don't really have that Ezekiel Elliott. You don't have that 89, again, that all-pro potential production guy who also has great athleticism traits. Marlon Mack definitely fits the bill. I do think there is a chance that he could do that. Like, I don't see any of the running backs that I just mentioned taking over Marlon Mack's role. But at the same time, I do think that because Marlon Mack's production was not exactly near the averages, that Hines is probably going to dip into his production a little bit. That there's going to be some other running backs that might dip into his production a little bit, because he just doesn't have that unbelievably elite sort of workload backness to him. And size-wise, not exactly the biggest running back ever. And that's the other thing, too, is there's not a lot of great size here, except for some of the older backs I mentioned, Robert Turbin, Christine Michael. Those guys are pretty big guys, but all the other guys are fairly lighter than what you would expect. But in terms of this backfield, it's just something to think about. Is this a situation where you just kind of roll the dice with Marlon Mack, or do you kind of take a bet on Hines? And the only reason why I want to come back to Hines is that he does have that elite skill set in terms of speed. There have been a couple backs in the past who had one really great athleticism trait and were able to turn that, despite the lack of production, into a great season. Alvin Kamara is probably the best back to, he's the most recent example, but Alvin Kamara is a running back who really only comes out every 10 years or so. Most of the time, productive running backs are very productive at the college level. But Kamara definitely shows the sort of instance where if a back does have a great athleticism skill set, they're able to take that and run with it, so to speak. No pun intended. So that's how I would really tackle this backfield. If I was looking at the Colts backfield, is I do see a lot of potential here, because I think we don't think about the situations that running backs end up in when it comes to offensive linemen and those other sort of situations. Because you look at a situation like the Cowboys and you look at how they're building that team prior to Ezekiel Elliott. Like, Ezekiel Elliott was basically the cherry on top. And sure, Zeke probably would have been productive at any other backfield, but it's the combination of having that stability of the Cowboys' offensive line with Zeke, which is what makes it so fantastic. You look at a situation like the Kansas City Chiefs with Kareem Hunt. That Chiefs' offensive line, stupidly athletic in many ways, with the exception of there's a couple players here and there that are not the most athletic, but their guards or centers, for the most part, were very, very athletic players. And then, of course, you stick Kareem Hunt in that situation, and boom, Kareem Hunt has a fantastic season, fantastic rookie season. But let me know in the comment section below, how do you think this backfield is going to turn out? Are you a Marlon Mack guy, where you just kind of feel like the production is going to supersede everything? Frank Gore being gone gives Marlon Mack a starring role, and he's just going to run with it. And adding the offensive line elements as well is just going to push him over the top, so to speak. Or do you think that Hines kind of dips into that production a bit? Because in many ways, I see that as a possibility, because Hines, and believe me, by no means do I think that Hines is going to end up becoming the lead workhorse in this situation, just because he was never the lead workhorse at North Carolina State. And again, Alvin Kamara types only come out every 10 years or so. So again, that was just the best situation for a guy like Kamara to go to with a offensive coordinator in many ways and head coach who really knows how to use personnel. But this, of course, is a different situation. This is the Colts. But yeah, let me know in the comment section below. How do you think this whole situation is going to roll out? Do you think that next year's draft is when they find their Ezekiel Elliott? Do you think like that's when they finally get a top running back? And who is that top running back going to be is another question to also answer in the future. But I just want to do this video to get some thoughts and opinions, to get some data perspective on fantasy football situations. I don't normally do these types of videos, so if you like it, please leave a like. Definitely, if you like the sort of just going through the backfield, the depth chart and stuff like that in terms of data, and kind of just throwing some thoughts out there about the situation. But I figured this is definitely a apt topic to bring up. One, because they drafted so many offensive linemen that are really athletic, but two, because it's not a very cut and dry situation. There's a lot of fluidness to this backfield in many ways. So Marlon Mack could definitely have his breakout season this year, or Hines could force a committee and then they find a workhorse back the next year, or they just flounder with a committee type system. But there's so many different ways that this backfield could go. I could go into a million of them. But again, leave a comment below what your general thoughts are about the Colts backfield. And of course, my name is James Coburn. You can find my other work at draftcoburn.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Gymmetrics. And if you like this content and you want more content like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Share this video as well with anybody that you know. Hit that notification button so you're always reminded when another video of mine drops. And I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.